So welcome back to lesson number 3. In this lesson, we're going to cover effects in Adobe Premiere, how to add them and adjust them. Also, we're going to deal with video transitions because they're fairly similar in how we approach these things. Okay, so you can jump on over to the effects workspace over here, and yours might look a little bit different than mine. Once again, my workspaces were all altered for earlier projects and stuff, and for whatever reason, when I reset the program, it didn't reset the effects workspace. So I kind of rebuilt this roughly as I remember the effects workspace being, there's a panel for effects on the right side of the screen. There is an effects controls pane over here. There's also the project window. That one might not be there, but I'm thinking it probably is. And then we have our program window and timeline, just like we did before. So if I would like to add any effects, all I have to do is find the effect that I want from the effects panel over here. We have presets, Lumetri presets, audio effects, audio transitions, video effects, and video transitions here. So I can twirl down, which is just a shorthand Adobe thing for clicking on these little arrows and expanding the folders underneath it. To show exactly what we have available to us. And there are a whole lot of things. So on my computer, I have a few effects that you probably don't. These are all like third-party plugins that most of them are paid plugins that you would have to buy and then install into your version of Adobe Premiere so that you can use them. They are super helpful, and it is one of the things that keeps me coming back to Adobe Premiere over other NLEs. There's just so many very strong plugins for it. So we'll deal with things that are more common in Premiere. There are a ton of effects, and you can kind of click and drag these onto your videos to see what each one does. But I do want to point you in the direction of a couple of things. One is all of the adjustment layers in Photoshop appear as effects in Premiere. Not all of them, but most of them. So if we know what those things are, we can just search for them up here, and we can find Video Effects Invert, which does this really wild thing to the alpha channel. So all of our blacks turn white, and all of the lighter stuff turns darker. Everything is inverted, right? It kind of looks like solarized photographs. What else are some adjustment layers? Hue and saturation hue and saturation is no longer on here. Contrast is, though. So we can find brightness and contrast, drag and drop that onto our clip, and then we can adjust that thing. Where invert just does it and it's over. Brightness and contrast is something that you would control, and that controls the look of your video. So if we wanted to add, say, some contrast to our video, so make our darks darker and our brights brighter, we could add this brightness and contrast control onto the clip, then look over in the effect controls pane over here, and we can see that we can make our image brighter by adjusting the brightness. I'm just clicking this blue number and dragging to the right to make it brighter, or dragging it to the left into the negative values, and our video would get darker. I can also just click on the text here and type in a value. So if I wanted just to reset that, I could type 0 there, and I could turn up the contrast by doing the same exact thing. So it is kind of helpful to click and drag and just kind of watch your video and see what looks good. But this particular clip was missing some contrast, so I added it there, and I think that looks good. You might notice right above the actual value controls, there are these mask options. You can create a 4-point polygon mask, which is basically draw a rectangle around in your program monitor of what you want to actually have this contrast control, and everything outside of that will not have the contrast control. You can also do an ellipse And then you could free draw a mask. Let's just try an ellipse mask, a round mask. And if I just adjust this thing, if I grab it, I can kind of move it here, and I'll put that over his head. And I can also adjust how this thing is shaped out, even though it's nice and round now. It might not fit his face properly. So I can grab any of these little dots along the way and change the shape. And then you might notice, let me just kind of zoom in here a little bit. I'm using the hand tool to move my work area. Okay, and then I just pressed V on my keyboard to jump back into my regular mouse tool, or my move tool is what it's called. So I can grab these little nodes along the way and adjust it, the shape of the mask. But there's also these little handles here. They're called Bezier handles, and that can adjust the curvature between these points. So I can really adjust the shape of that mask with these two items. Now, if you look closely, you'll see that there is a solid line, and then there are two dotted lines, and that's the feather area, those dotted lines. So as I turn up the feather, you'll see those dotted lines become further apart from each other. And the idea here is those the inner dots, the inner dotted line, everything on the inside of that is full value. And then from that first dotted line to the second one, it's going to fall off in a very gradual manner. So 100% of this 19 value contrast is within this space, and then it starts falling off from 100% in here to 0% right here. Okay, there's also a mask opacity. So if you didn't want that full 12%, like if we turned up our contrast, let's turn it up dramatically so we can see what's going on here. Okay, very dramatic. And then you can see full contrast here, and it's getting lighter and lighter and lighter in terms of its contrast until nothing, right? Like a nice soft fall off. Now, if I wanted to blend this 81 contrast with the original image, I can turn down the opacity or the transparency of this mask here, and then I can find something that works for me as well. I can also expand the mask, so let me just turn that back to up to 100 and turn the feather down so you can see what's going on here. So here's my mask. It's on his face, but maybe I wanted to grab some of the outside edge, so I can expand that mask outward, or I can contract it by using the expansion in a negative direction. I'm not super keen on that. Instead, if I just do that and turn up the feather, that looks a lot better. If I jump out, it looks pretty good until, I start to see everything around it. So this mask isn't really working for me, but I can certainly do it. And I can do it on basically every effect that I add. There's a whole lot of these when you add effects and stuff. So if we just jump up here to motion, you see that there are some effects on your clips automatically. It doesn't matter if you added them or not. There's always going to be this motion and opacity for your clip. So opacity, we kind of covered that already. So as you go down from 100, you start to turn up the transparency of your clip. So right now it's at 30%, and there's 100%. And as I turn it down, you can see I kind of fade from the one clip to another. Or if I get rid of the clip on video track number 1, I'm blending it with darkness. There's nothing on, directly underneath this clip where my playhead is. So now it's just getting darker there. Okay. There's also these interesting things here, though, blending modes, which you, again, might be familiar with from Photoshop. It's a somewhat newer addition into Premiere. So if you're familiar with blending modes, they are all here. If you're familiar with blending modes from After Effects, most of them are here. So how we want to blend video track 2 with video track 1 is up to us. So we can overlay it or soft light it, or maybe do a color burn or a darker color. So whichever clip here has the darker color, that's going to show up. So if anything on 38.move has a darker color than 3.move in that space, then we will see it. If it's lighter, we will not see it. So these are all fun to kind of experiment with. The big ones that I often use are overlay and soft light. My computer's just taking a sec. Oh, no, I'm on number 3 there. So if I'm on 38.move and then I do overlay or soft light, you can see that it's a just nice kind of way to blend two images. This is not particularly pleasing, but if you used something like video grain or noise or something like that you've downloaded online, there are all these like overlay videos that you can blend with your existing video, and I would absolutely recommend either overlay or soft light. So the other thing that we have here is motion controls. So if we want to just reposition our video, if we click position up there, we can click and drag our video to wherever it needs to be. If our playhead is on top of an area where we can see from one clip to another, I can move my clip around and we can see what's underneath it there. I think that there might still be some opacity stuff going on here. Yep, overlay. Let's just turn that to normal. All right, much better. So if I grab the position of my video, I can kind of move it around in the space. I can also scale up my video or scale down my video. So if I have something that's maybe the wrong scale, or maybe there's something on the outskirts of my video that's unpleasant, maybe a boom mic dropped into frame just a little bit, and I can push in, I can scale up and crop that out a little bit. I can also rotate my video here. Okay, and then I can adjust the anchor point too. So what the anchor point does is the anchor point is the area that my video rotates around, right? So whatever this is, if I click the little refresh button on any of these items, it'll just set it back to 0. So if I rotate, it's rotating around the center point because my anchor point is centered on my video. But if I adjust my anchor point, I can click and drag these numbers, or I can just click it and move it around. Now if I rotate, it still rotates around the anchor point, but the anchor point is no longer centered on my video, which makes it a weird kind of rotation. So you can make all of these things like a static property. So if you wanted to, maybe your camera was a little bit off center or off axis on the tripod, you could always do a very slight rotation. So maybe it's like a 2% rotation just to clean that up, and we scale it back up and we put it back where it's supposed to be, but we're losing a little bit of space. We'll really be able to see it right here. We have a little bit of black on the outskirts of our video. We can just kind of scale that up to maybe like 110, and now we don't have black anywhere. Our video is in theory balanced. I think I made it off balance a little bit actually, but in this scenario we've corrected something. But what you might want to do is something a little bit crazier. Maybe you want to rotate and animate that rotation. So if you see next to any of the properties in motion, you can also see it in opacity. You can see it probably in brightness and contrast as well. Yeah, brightness and contrast both have it. They all have this little stopwatch area, and that's toggling on and off keyframes. So keyframes are really important as we work with effects. We can toggle on a keyframe just by clicking on that little stopwatch icon. So let's say we want it to rotate over time. Let's put our anchor point back to the center point and move our video back real quick. Okay, so we want this to rotate maybe 180 degrees, a pretty significant rotation. So we are going to go ahead and toggle on keyframes for rotation. If you hover over it, it says toggle animation. Once it goes blue, you'll see that you have like a nice little diamond icon right where your playhead is positioned. And that means what this diamond icon means is at this point, at this very frame, this is the value that exists there. Now, if we move our playhead over and adjust this value, we'll see a new diamond appear where our playhead is. And then, okay, let's just do it. 180. Okay, so it flips completely over. Now you see one diamond here and one diamond where you've made that adjustment. Likewise, if you'd like to, you can always... Let's Control Z real quick and get rid of that. You can always add a keyframe just by clicking the little diamond icon here and then adjusting that value after the fact. The only problem with working this way is it breeds some bad habits. So if, now you see that we rotate from 2% to 180 over time. And what we're doing here is at 2% right here, at 180% here, and then every frame in between gets an equal amount, right? So it's going to move consistently at the same rate from here to here. Okay, so the thing that I was talking about with bad habits is if you put your playhead approximately where that keyframe is, and that's exactly where the keyframe is, but if I'm one frame off from there, I think that that's 180, and I think like, I like the 180, but I actually want to go all the way around to 360. You're going to see that it does go around to 360, but right afterwards, it's going to jump 180. So what's actually going on here is not that the computer is glitching or anything like that, but if I zoom way in, I can see that I have my 360 keyframe, and then I have that 180 degree keyframe. And because there's no frames in between it, it's just going to jump straight there, right? Like there's no frame interpolation that it can do. So that is the bad habit that can come from, just trying to move your playhead there, click the add or remove keyframes, and then adjust those things. Instead, if you need to jump to a specific keyframe and make that adjustment, all you have to do is click the little arrows next to that add keyframe button, and you'll jump directly to the next or previous keyframes. So you need to make sure that your playhead is directly on top of that keyframe. So if you think that you can just, click a keyframe and then adjust its value, so maybe I change that back to 180, it didn't change that keyframe. Instead, I made a new value, and it created a 100 degree keyframe at my playhead's point, right? So it goes all the way around to that 360, and then it rotates back to 180 at this point. So it is something that you kind of got to get used to if you're not familiar with it and stuff, but it's pretty simple once you do get used to it. Now, if I watch this play back, I have a full 360 spin. It's a little bit crazy already, but there's something that happens here where it like kind of clicks into place. And there's a lot of animation software that is like, introductory level will kind of have that issue with its animations that it really just snaps there. And to smooth out motion between keyframes, if we click this, we can see that there are options here for ease in and ease out. So if you ease into a stop and ease out from a stop, just like you would imagine you're driving down the highway and you see a red light, you ease into the stop and it makes everybody feel good, right? They don't feel like you're going to crash your car. If you stop suddenly, everybody braces for impact, right? So we can do the same kind of thing with our animations if we ease into our stops. And if we ease out from a stop, again, car analogy, if that red light turns green and you floor it, it's a little bit scary for your passengers, right? And if you smooth out, if you take off gradually, then it's a little bit nicer. So if we add these, you see how it kind of smooths out and slows down there a little bit? It should make your animations a little bit nicer to add those eases. So we can do that with virtually any property. Okay, so if you are going back to that whole effects rack over here, if you're familiar with Photoshop stuff and Photoshop effects in general, you should be able to find virtually all of those things over here with video application. I'm going to show you another one that can really help us with animation, and that is a lens flare. So if we just search for lens flare, we can find generate lens flare. And a lot of the things under video effects and then generate are meant to go on like white video that goes above video track 3 and stuff. But this one in particular, lens flare, there it is. We can click, drag, and drop onto any of our clips, and we get this nice little lens flare. We can adjust what kind of lens flare it is. They have 3 options, 3 whole options. There's a lot of third-party plugins for lens flares and stuff. But we can find the lens flare that works for us, and then we can animate where it's coming from. So if we move the flare center, you see how it's actually a flare where there's a light source, and then there's where it's striking the lens. So we can put this maybe in a bright spot of our video. Okay, and that looks good there. And we'll just toggle on keyframes for it. And if our video moves at all, which it does just a little bit, besides, you know, the huge rotation. So from here, it looks good here, but it's off here. So we'll just adjust the X and Y position to put it where it should be. And you can see that where the lens flare affects the actual lens adjusts with the camera movement now. And it does hit a little bit hard, so maybe we'll add a ease in. So under temporal interpolation, sometimes it's that. Under your keyframe options, right click, ease out from the stop, and we'll see, yeah, that smoothed it out pretty good. All right, it is that simple for some animation. All you have to do, toggle on those keyframes. You can create masks. You can do all that fun stuff with any video effects. So if you've added an effect to a particular clip, like here we have this brightness and contrast here. If I'd like to toggle it off and on, even though it's been added to our clip, if we just click this FX icon right here, that will turn our the visibility of that effect off for this particular clip. And if we exported it now with that FX, with the diagonal line through it, that effect would not be exported with the rest of our video. But we can toggle it right back on, and you can kind of do like a before and after and see how your clip looked without the effect and then with the effect. So it's a quick way to test your effect and see if it's doing what you want it to do. Okay, and if I would like to save what I've done here, if I really like this brightness and contrast control, and I want to be able to apply that to multiple clips, I could copy and paste that stuff. If I want to copy and paste an effect, I would copy the clip that the effect is on. I would navigate to the clip that I want to apply it to, and then I would not just paste the clip, but right click and click paste attributes, and it's going to ask me, what exactly do you want to paste? Do you want to paste everything? And I say yes. But if you have multiple effects that you don't want to also paste there, you can just toggle those off with the checkmark option. Press OK, and then that brightness and contrast will now be applied to this clip. Now you can do that with multiple clips as well. If we select several clips here, we can right click and paste attributes on all of those things, and now we can see that all of those clips have that brightness and contrast control on them. Now, if you would like to save this for future projects that you can apply to any number of clips far into the future, we can actually turn this into a preset. If we right click and go to Save Preset, we can name this Brightness and Contrast Chess, so we can remember what it's from, and I can press OK. And now, if I head on over to my effects and presets area, under presets, I should be able to find B and C chest. There it is, brightness and contrast for the chest. And if I click and drag and drop that onto any clip, it's going to do the same thing. It's going to add that brightness and contrast with those specific parameters that I set in that other clip. Now, besides effects, you can certainly also add transitions. Now, transitions are very similar to effects, and they work about the same way. You can click, drag, and drop them between clips rather than on top of clips, and it's just a transition from one clip to another or from one clip to black. And we can see all these video transitions by just twirling down on video transitions here, and they have a whole bunch of different stuff they can but maybe the most common thing to see in a film or video project is a cross dissolve, or just a dissolve in general. And the idea with a dissolve is it fades from one clip to another, or from one clip to darkness, or a clip to white. So I'm just going to put that between two clips here, and we can see here's my transition. And I can kind of move that around too, so it fades in a slightly different way. So you can see one clip fades into the other as I scrub through there slowly. And we can make sure that this second clip fades in more than the first clip fades out. So we just kind of adjust the timing of things. We can also adjust the timing of things by stretching this transition out, just grabbing the handle just like you would with a regular video clip. So now this transition lasts a lot longer. And if you want it to be very precise, if you double click that transition, you'll see right there, duration. We can set that duration to be maybe 5 seconds. Here's 5 seconds, and change that 24 there to nothing. So exactly 5 seconds, our video will dissolve into another. And if I want my video to fade to black, I can just click and drag that cross dissolve to the end of a clip where it's not going to dissolve into anything other than the darkness outside of that clip. We can also use something like a dip to black. We can click and drag that. It's going to do the same exact thing. But if I used a dip to black in between two clips, it's going to dip to black and then come back up. So here is dip to black. A little bit different between clips, but on the side of a clip, it's going to do the same exact thing. Now, something that we can use if we are doing something like a dissolve, we can fade to a color. And this could come in handy for like graphics work and stuff in the future too. So if we click on this new item button here, we'll see that we have a bunch of options. We can choose color matte here. We can make sure that it's going to be the same size as our sequence. Press OK, and it's going to give you the option to make a color matte of any color that you'd like. I'm just going to choose white though, and we can call it white screen. Press OK there, and you'll see that your white screen is this graphic, and it exists in your project window. We can treat that just like we would any other video clip. So if I click and drag that in, and then add that cross dissolve, maybe I'll put it right next to it. There we go. Add a cross dissolve between the two. Now instead of fading to black, it's going to fade to white. Now, you might have seen that there is a dip to white as well in the transitions area. If we click and drag that, we're going to see that it dips to white, but it's going to come back to black because all we have is black at the edge there. If we put that white graphic on the edge there, though, we can get... Oh, we need to actually put that in between those two clips. There it goes. Then we can get that nice dip to white, and it will stay white. One more thing about transitions, there is this quick shortcut, since everybody likes to use that cross dissolve. If you press Control and D on your keyboard, you'll see that you get a cross dissolve on both sides of your clip. Whatever clip you have selected there. And it is a constant, how many frames is it? 1 second and 7 frames. So it'll be that every time you add this. You can go into preferences and change that. We'll get into that at the very end of the course when we get a little bit deeper into the program. But if you have two clips right next to each other and press that Control D, it will notice that this is intended just for like your clip fading in and fading out. So if you have things in between, you would manually have to add a cross dissolve between the two. Something that I come across all the time with people that are new to the program. If you have a clip and it is at the very edge of that clip, there are no frames that you can blend into this clip. So if I try to click and drag this cross dissolve, it'll still work as a cross dissolve, but it'll only go in one direction. So I can't put that in between the two clips. I can only have this clip fade into I can only have the clip that's labeled as 2.move fade into 3. I can't have 3 fade in the other way. If I click and try to drag that in that direction, it just will not work.